And I finished caching result. So it is just 100 frames and it's looking pretty interesting. It's a little bit more smooth than I expect, but for some vertices, we need to have a smooth result like for this. So we can save this as an option. So let's close this guy. And let's play with the materials. So we have a camera and I want to add similar to this material, maybe a little bit brighter. So what we can do here, go to material palette and let's choose the pyro. I don't know, we can use like a basic smoke to work with this. Go to material, let's call this and the vertex version 1. Okay, now what I want to apply here, I don't need any intensity, so let's just remove this guy. And with the density scale, let's play a bit. Let's just go, and I forget to apply my material for the tornado, so choose vertex 1, go to out. We don't have a dimension, so it will add it by default if you press render, or you can manually add dimension node. And I want to remove the candidate objects, except of this I want to select the tornado. It's just only one object here, but I prefer to select manually and using the force object. So let's press render, go to frame like 85. It always needs some time for create a nice shape, so it's beginning from frame like 25 or something. We can render 75 frames, so I think that it will be enough. So if you look on our, let me disable the auto update because I don't want to have another render, and let me just see how many voxels do I have. It's not a very high res simulation, just 10 million particles. The reason I did such a low res simulation because I'm gonna add the transparent shader for this vortex, and it will cut many details. So anyway, if you want to have a nice details and you want to create like a density, the big dense smoke, then you should have some quality. But if I want to create a very low density material, it will remove many shadows, many details from this vortex. So you always need to have something like the gold middle between the quality and result you want to have. So I think that 10 million particles or 10 million voxels, and it's in a sparse mode. So I think that it will be enough for this case. Maybe all my later simulation, I will increase the amount of the voxels. So what I want to do here, the first thing I can decrease the sketching phase. So you could probably go to the left and to the right side, and I'll let you know, I think you already know that if we add a sketching phase like 1, let's enable the auto update again, you will see the result and it will be a little bit dramatic. Yeah, it's totally black. There is no lights going from this object. Or if you go to the -1, it will remove any kind of a bounce that goes through this vortex. And as you can see, we have some ramp here, and this ramp is from our skylight. So this background image is not like the lighting image, it's just background for my camera, which I will remove with render. I just want to see this background to correct my shape and shader. So we can definitely go to skylight and try to, we can disable the sky environment map and use some files here. Okay, so we can use a JPEG. It's the same JPEG which I have here on the background, and you can see that it's looking interesting. Or you can use the sky environment map as you want. this case, I'm gonna leave this, but I get back to my material option and remove the scatter phase to reduce the scatter phase to -0.3. So I can show you a difference between those scattering phases. And let me just create a little bit more bigger quality result with rendering. I can select just a few parts of this vertex, and you can snap it and back to 0, which is by default, and you can see the difference how it was. So this scattering phase, yeah, the light is going through the smoke. It doesn't create a very dense black shadows, and it's looking a little bit better. And what I want to correct here is maybe some color adjustment. So get, let's say it's, I don't know, 0.4. Oops, I don't want to have a purple. So again, maybe add a snap, another one just to compare. And a little bit darker there I want to have. So maybe add a little bit more blue and green color and decrease the density scale, maybe like 0.5. Maybe even lower, 0.4. Just wait a little bit till it creates a nice result. And let's go to our light. I should increase the light, the sunlight, maybe add like 1.5 for the sunlight, and decrease the skylight maybe to 0.5 from this. Okay. That's looking a little bit better. Let's go to material again. And let's go and play a little bit with the shadow. So the thing is, if we see the shadow color is white, it doesn't mean that we have a white shadows. But if we decrease the shadow density, we can create a more brighter result if we play with the shadow color. So the first thing, I want to remove a little bit of density from the shadows. Now you can see a difference. Like it was very bright, but I don't want to have a very bright image like we had here. Yeah, the sun is somewhere there, it's not shining too bright. So this is more appropriate. So let's remove some green, 0.8, a little bit more red, 0.7. Just keep playing with those shadows to make this more like a bluish. Maybe a little bit more and more. And yeah, now it's looking a little bit good, better. So we don't have a fire, and this means that all what we can do is changing the smoke here. And what's wrong with my scatter phase? I want to 0.3, -0.3. And it should create, yeah. My light is not very good. Let's go to my out. Let's see. Go to image, extra image planes, and I want to have the direct lighting per light, so export variable for each light. And let's see. I want to see lighting, so I have two lights, it's a sunlight and a skylight. And yeah, it's interesting. It's just, you can see like how light is going through this bottom. That's interesting. Okay, so let's check again my material. Maybe a bit brighter, you know, maybe like add more brighter areas. All right, I guess the shadow density maybe just a tiny smaller, just a tiny bit. And with some light, maybe go to 2.5. Yeah, something like that. So another thing I can use here is go to the mantra node and apply some motion blur, because the vortex can have a motion blur. We can render out the velocity vectors, but mainly when we have a rotation, when you need to have like a radial motion blur, it doesn't create radial motion blur on the post-process, in the compositing stage, because the vector blur can create just directional blur. And so that's why I want to use the motion blur. And to do that, I go to this geometry and select the velocity blur from the geometry velocity blur. We definitely need some have some velocities. We already have this. So just compare what we have earlier and what we had now. It's looking good. Some weird light here. So I don't know, maybe choose a different frame. Frame, so like a 53. That's part of an image. So now the thing I want to add here is with rendering, I will remove the image from my camera. So enable background image in this case, and I want to render out this vortex. Maybe play a little bit with my light, go to a sunlight, and I guess I can rotate this sunlight a little bit. So we can play with rotation using the skylight actually. Now let's rotate it to the camera a little bit. I don't want to have this kind of a black shadow area. Let's take a while. Because it decreases skylight intensity and increase the, yeah. So maybe I will get back to 1.5. Get back to 1.5, and yes, this is exactly what I want to have. Let me just for a moment enable again my image. Yeah. Maybe just a tiny bit brighter. Yeah. So I will render out this guy. Go to out. I want to render, I guess I will keep the sampling rate at 3.3. So we can increase this by going a bigger sample rate, like 4x4 or 6x6. But in this case, with the motion blur stuff, we can leave this as it is. So just by default, and yeah, I can play with the volume step rate. So maybe I increase, I don't know, do we had, let me just disable the preview. So I want to have like a final result, and I want to compare the difference between the volume step rate 0.25, which is by default, and increasing to mainly 90%. I render out my volumetrics with 0.5 volume step rate. Sometimes if you want to get a better quality, use a tiny small details, so you can increase it even more. Not to 1, but a little bit bigger than 0.5. So let's just render out just a part of this image, and I want to compare with volume stepper 8.5. Well, if it will increase my quality pretty good, and it doesn't increase the render time too much, I can leave it. So let's snap it, go 2.5, and let's see a difference. Let's see a difference here. And here's a render. So as you can see, it doesn't add something dramatically better. We have a little bit like a smooth, blurry result, but I think that I don't need to spend some time for getting just like 5% better result with losing 20% of the time render. Yes, I can leave it by 25. We have just 10 million voxels, so maybe if I increase the render the simulation quality, maybe if I increase the amount of voxels here on the simulation, then I can increase 2.5 to get more information from those voxels. But in this stage, I guess I will leave it by default. And that's what we have with rendering. It doesn't take too many time, like 3 hours for all those frames from 25 to frame 57. This is my last frame I render out for now. And that's what we have. That's what we have. It's a little bit smooth, there's not too many turbulence, and we definitely want to increase the turbulence for this vortex to get not maybe more realistic but more interesting result, because in many different videos you can see that we have a lot of turbulence on the shape of this vortex. So we can play with the noise and create a different result. Or we can, create the same shape with the different settings and combine those using like layers to create even more interesting effect.